Okay, I've just turned the recording on, as a disclaimer, everyone, while it shouldn't alter your participation, we are recording our events, and once we edit the transcripts, they will be made available to all conference registrants. My name is Inger, and I'm one of the Peralta Equity Team members. A couple of housekeeping items. One is that Kevin and Didem are leaders in the conference have enabled Zoom to have automatic captioning. So on the bottom of your Zoom window, you will see among the other little near the chat button and reactions button, a little toggle that has a CC. If you click that, it would allow you to turn the captioning on, the auto captioning, and then you could see captioning if that is of use to you. Secondly, I wanted to let you know, generally we're encouraging people to use the chat, although our host this time has a number of other technology options for you, but do feel free to use the chat. I'll keep an eye on that, and if for any reason the presenter overlooks something important, I'll remember it and bring it to her attention at the end. And we have had no Zoom bombers yet, but and we're all the way at the end of 3 days with good fortune, so hopefully that will not happen. And with that, I will turn our last real workshop of the event. We have a closing event after this one, but our saving the best for last, perhaps, workshop 5, reflecting on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and decolonization in portfolio practice. And Kristina, I think I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Inger. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. That is the traditional short greeting that you can often hear in Aotearoa, New Zealand, where I live. But as you can hear from my accent, I wasn't quite born here in the country, but am a German transplant and moved to New Zealand just a little over 10 years ago. And since then, I've been working with a company that creates an open source ePortfolio platform. And that's why the topic today is going to focus on ePortfolios. We are not really going to look at a particular technology though, but want to talk about DEIBD in general. And if you've, as you've already seen on the first slide, if you can please do click the link to the answer garden and answer the first question. In the meantime, I'll also put in the link to the slides to make it easier for you to click on any links that you can find in there. And Kevin is actually kind of co-host today as well, because he and we are looking together at the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and decolonization principle as part of the work that we do on the AAEEBL Digital Ethics Task Force. So I'll give you a few more minutes to kind of think about your answers for the question and just introduce you to the topic and why we wanted to have this workshop today with you. But before we go into the particulars, I'd just like to make everybody aware or remind everybody of agreements, and some of them have been very implicit already in throughout the Peralta Equity Conference. But since we are potentially talking about quite personal experiences in the breakout rooms, sharing ideas, sharing opinions, I'd just like to iterate that from my perspective, we are all here today to learn something and also to challenge our own preconceived notions and biases, and therefore listen without judgment and be open to receive feedback. We want to discuss an argument, not a person, and keep everything that people share in breakout rooms confidential, and that is in particular around organizations, names, organizations that you think people might be talking about. If you do want to add any other workshop agreements, please use the chat for them so that we can see if we'd like to add them as well. Or if you want to challenge any of the ones that you can see here on screen. Okay, while you can still think about that a bit, I'd like to tell you a little bit about why we are talking about portfolios today. How many of you here in today's session are already using portfolios, either in their traditional form on paper or in more contemporary forms as electronic portfolios, typically web-based? AAEEBL, the Association of Authentic, Experiential and Evidence-Based Learning, is the US association that looks very much into portfolio work and the advancement of portfolios as method of new pedagogies and working with students through learning evidence, and also looking at organizations beyond just the formal educational context. And so one idea of looking at portfolios really is also the idea of folio thinking that was introduced in particular by Helen Chen from Stanford University a few years ago. There's a really nice quote from Vicky Suter that you can see here on the slides that says that folio thinking, and therefore summarizing what Helen and her colleagues said, saying that folio thinking is a process of engaging in the collection, organization, reflection, and connection that leads to a person's abilities to speak intelligently and concisely, meaning to tell stories about one's learning experiences, what they mean and their value, and how these experiences relate one to each other. So we are not looking at assessment data from a multiple choice perspective, but really look at storytelling, learning about students, learning about co-workers, learning about faculty, and their learning processes, experiences, how they gain skills and competencies. And because by telling stories, we can oftentimes talk very personally. I think DEIBD is very important for us to consider, and digital ethics in general as well. And that is why we are looking at digital ethics principles as part of an AAEEBL task force that started in 2019 after a number of community members in the AAEEBL community realized, well, when we are creating digital portfolios, we kind of expect that students know a lot of things, know how to reference, how to give access, where their data is stored, but do those students actually know that, and do faculty know that? And if you open the slides directly through the link that we had sent through earlier, you're welcome to just click on the image and it will open the principles themselves. Because what you can see here on screen is the first set of principles that we developed between 2019 and 2020, altogether 10, that look at various elements that should be taken into consideration when either starting a portfolio initiative, implementing it in a study program, or even just in a course or campus-wide, and then also when dealing with platform providers to make sure that they also follow these digital ethics principles and make it possible for portfolio creators to actually adhere to them. Already when we looked into these 10 principles, we knew from the start that we wouldn't be able to deal with all of them in the first year, but that there were some others that needed to be taken into consideration. And I'm not going to talk about all of these principles in detail, but rather invite you to watch a short video that I've done for the first day of the Peralta Equity Conference, where I briefly go through each principle. So now that we are in our second year of the task force, we decided to look into 3 more complex principles, and those are diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and decolonization, the visibility of labor, and evaluation. And you might think, well, why only 3 principals this year and not 10 like the other? Were we more productive during the pandemic or during the first year of the pandemic and right before? Or why is that? From my perspective, it really comes down to complexity, because all of these 3 principles touch on so many different areas. And as our abbreviation already says, for the principle we are looking at today, there are quite a lot of concepts involved, and therefore they are definitely meatier to talk about than the previous ones that we had. And so today, really the focus is on the DEIBD principle, and kind of like this Venn diagram shows here, they all don't stand on their own. They overlap. Certain areas from diversity can be found in equity, or certain ideas from equity can be found in inclusion, and the other way around. Belonging comes in, and also decolonization, because we also want to look into indigenous peoples and their cultures and how that can all be represented in portfolios, how things should be taken into consideration when working with students from a really big, large range of backgrounds. And where we would like to be is right in that middle part of this Venn diagram, which looks now like a flower. And really be in the middle to take all of these concepts into consideration and be in an area where we can support students and faculty and also technology providers in order to make good decisions that don't just work for one group of people, whether small or large, but work for lots of different people in order to make everybody feel welcome. And as during this workshop, we are going to look at this DEIBD ABLE Task Force principle more closely, and you can see the link in the chat now, so you're welcome to go to that Google document in order to view it. And I know that there's quite a lot of text, so we're not going to read through it all. But during the breakouts, I'd like to invite you to skim through it and see if you can then maybe later also have some time or take some time to read through it, and if you like, also leave some comments. As a disclaimer, this principle is still in the works, so there's still some editing to do, potentially also some condensing, and we are still going through a review process, so it really is a draft version at this moment. But we wanted to share it with you in order to invite feedback and also be open about the work that we are doing. And now let me just briefly look into the chat and see if there's anything in there. And thank you so much, Kevin, for sharing that you're using ePortfolio assignments with your students. That's why you are on the principal as well and a member of the task force. So it's really fantastic to have you on here, and also to have the insight from you and all the Peralta Community College work that you have been involved in, and that flows into it as well. Now, it's been a lot of speaking from my end, so it's definitely time that we go into workshop groups, because I said it was going to be a workshop, so I definitely want to make it a workshop. And so the idea is, and I'll just pop the link to the breakout room documents into the chat, that you take, how many people do we have, Kevin? Can I see that easily?
20 total.
20. Then I think we can have 4 breakout rooms, because I know that we are 4 from so you 3 and me, so that we have 4 breakout rooms in order to take a look at the questions that you can find on the breakout room document on each of the breakout rooms, and they are an invitation for you to consider, rather than you need to answer all of those questions. And so the questions really are, and the questions are fairly portfolio independent to a degree, because we didn't know how many of you are already working with portfolios, so we didn't want to include anybody who might just be starting out their journey or coming to this workshop to kind of learn a little bit more about portfolios. So really also think about DEIBD in the wider educational context and bring your experiences in. And so the questions are, how can educators make sharing one's identity, culture, and background through an electronic portfolio safe? What strategies do you already use to foster DEIBD? What are your top 3 tips for instructors starting with ePortfolios in class, considering a diverse group of students? Do you have a concrete example maybe that you'd like to share as a good example for incorporating this principle in your own teaching? And maybe also, what is holding you currently back? Are there technological restrictions, institutional restrictions? And then lastly, once you've had a chance to read through the draft document of the principles, or even just parts of it, do you have any feedback for us? So I'd like to give you 15 minutes in your breakout room so that you can take a couple of minutes to just get into the principle itself, maybe just read the abstract, or focus on one topic if your group decides to choose one of the letters in our topic, and then have a group conversation. And after those 15 minutes, we are getting back together in the larger groups, and I'd like to invite you to share whatever you feel comfortable sharing in the larger groups, either as a summary from your group conversation, or maybe sharing a particular strategy or a scenario that you have encountered. So the breakout rooms are not going to be recorded, but the larger group conversation at the end is being recorded again. So if you do want to share a particular example, please make sure that you're not going to mention any organization, and you're welcome to either put on your camera or leave it off. And in the breakout rooms, if you can use your audio, that would be fantastic. But if you're bound to use the chat only, then I'd like to ask the other group members to also please keep an eye on the chat. Thank you. Kevin, may I ask you to hit the breakout room button and create the 4 breakout rooms?
Absolutely. And would you like me to make sure that one of the co-hosts is in each room?
If you can manage that, that would be so wonderful.
Okay.
Not quite sure if I can break Kevin's concentration now, or whether I should stay quiet. But I hope you'll all have wonderful conversations in your breakout sessions, and share as little or as much as you like.
Okay, I've assigned people to each room, and then for the co-hosts, maybe we can go alphabetically. So Didem will be room 1, Inger room 2, Kevin room 3, and Kristina room 4.
Kia ora.
Hello. Are you there, DePauli? Sharon, if you're there, I just, yep, moved you to a room. Okay.
Hello? I
Hi,
can't.
Sandra. I'm going to assign you to one of the breakout rooms real
So
quick.
actually, I just came from one of the breakout rooms, and there was no moderator there, and all of us were novices. And so I was like, I'm going to leave the breakout room and see if we can get someone to help us, or one of the moderators to join, because we were 4 novices in the room that we didn't even really know. We have questions.
So I actually don't either. So I was just as surprised as you are, being just the moderator and not as much a participant. So did you look at her slides? Try looking at her slides.
Not yet. No, we were just trying to kind of figure out.
Let's do this. Why don't let me put you back in the room and then see if I can reach out to Kristina and ask if she might be willing to shift rooms and come and join you.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
And you were in room 2?
I think I was in 2, yeah.
Okay, let's see. Move to, oh, now see, now it won't let me put you back in room 2. It says that you had not yet joined. Do you still have an option to go to room 2?
Not that I see. Oh, yes, I do. I can join. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Inger, for bringing us back.
Yes, I missed you all. Just about everybody else will be back in about 15 more seconds. Kevin, I bet you know what this means, this gesture.
Yes, it means you may know of a four-legged creature nearby.
Hello and welcome back, everybody.
Yes.
And just take a quick look through the notes. It seems like everybody was discussing things and not worrying about writing things down, which is perfectly fine, because sometimes you just want to be in the moment and discuss things rather than being described. And so I'd be very interested to hear from you what you've discussed, what you'd like to share, and whether that is portfolio related or the topic DEIBD in general in education. And please do feel free to grab the microphone for that. Or if you prefer to type, then type in the chat and we'll hear from somebody who would like to share on the microphone.
Maybe our group can go first, if it's okay. I'm looking at Scott and I'm looking at,
Okay.
yeah, Scott, why don't you go ahead?
I'm a producer, so my wife is the professor. So I do all the tech work for my wife. We have 4 monitors in our room to run our class, and it makes it effort. Joe never has to touch the mouse when we're giving classes. I do all that work behind the scenes. So I'm here to glean off all you experts. I do have a song, though, I'd like to sing. Where have all the teachers gone? Gone to admin, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? So, sorry about that. I've been wanting to say that in so many of these workshops I've been to, but one of the things my wife and I like to enunciate or project when it comes to inclusivity and making them feel comfortable is we want them to feel welcome and wanted. And sometimes we forget that word wanted. How have you have to think about that. How do you make them feel wanted to be in your class? What are you projecting? And we really work on that diligently, making them feel welcome and wanted. I also shared our classes. The students never see the other students. We're very different. So the students think, could be 20 in the class, they're having a one-on-one session for an hour because they see Joan in her presentation. And they're still on the edge of their seats after 1 hour because they're not looking at 40 faces or 20 faces. Because we've heard this burnout about, especially women, don't want to look at their face over and over again, for 4 hours or 5 hours. Our students just see the teacher and the presentation and the work. And they're still on the edge of their seat when the class is finished. They're so excited to have this illusion of being one-on-one in class. So they really feel part of Joan as she's teaching. They're not distracted by other students. One of the things about teaching sign language is distractions. So we ask our students to wear earplugs in class. Less distractions, more reception for their eyeballs. It's like unplugging a USB port. And this USB now works a little bit better. So that's how we kind of, that inclusivity, that type of a message we're bringing about today. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Scott. And Amy had a brilliant idea about portfolios. Amy, do you want to share that with the group?
Sure. We were talking about how, question 1, how can educators make sharing one's identity, culture, and background through an electronic portfolio safe? And I was talking about sharing my own bias and making sure that I was identifying the big 8 identities in collecting that from students in an anonymous way. So in the beginning of a class, ask, what are your big 8 identities? You're going to provide this to me on a anonymous form, and then I'll compile it and give it to us. So we'll see, you know, I myself would think everyone's on this class is mostly they're going to be straight and they're going to be white and they're going to be upper middle class. And then I will share my own identities. And then, which I'm white, but I'm a lesbian, I'm married. I did grow up upper middle class. I have glasses, but other than that, I'm able-bodied. So then they can know that there are options and they can be honest about their own identities. And when we go to that as a compiled list, I ask, what's your gender? And they can write it in. So we might have 8 genders that are represented in a group of 30. And so it expands our thinking, I think, and provides a space that students can know there is an expansive space for their own identities and for understanding each other's and getting to know each other in a precise way. And that was my idea.
Thank you very much, Amy. And also thank you, Scott. And for those that might not have been in some of the other workshops, and Scott, you only mentioned at the end that you and your wife do sign language and are sign language classes, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We teach American Sign Language, yes.
And so that is where it's also very important to have that focus then, so that contextualizes it well. Thank you.
That's correct.
I know that we had some conversations in breakout room breakout room 2. And would you like to say how you're working with your students at Peralta?
Maybe Inger, since Inger was leading that group.
Actually, I wasn't. I was in the main group when people would come back, put them back in their room. So who was in group 2?
Yeah, we were, myself and 3 other folks. We just actually, because many of us were not doing ePortfolio, we didn't quite know a lot about that. So we just talked about what we're doing to reach our very diverse student population. I just talked about, at College of Alameda, we have a large Muslim population, and I've just been having difficulty finding resources and reading materials for them. So just trying to figure out, how do I get resources? What do, I've attended a couple of these seminars at this conference and got some great ideas. So now the big part is taking the time to make use of them. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Deepali.
Yes, thank you so much, Kristina and team and colleagues here. I've been listening. I was multitasking, so please pardon me. I'm not able to fully have conversations, but I really love all the ideas. And I teach business and business reading courses, also managing diversity in workplace. I really like idea of e-portfolios. Sometimes we don't have, in my class, and those of us that teach online for some time now, every single semester, I like to try something new and different. Just to be inclusive, especially at community college level, I like to give options to my students. If some students feel comfortable, especially sharing of their information, in ePortfolio or not. So I have different kind of assignments and just to be inclusive. But I really love all the ideas presented here. So thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing, Deepali. And yes, online teaching in particular and learning has made it even easier to do personalization of learning and give students options. And then kind of putting that together also with in-classroom discussions is good to see. Now, looking at the clock, it is 1 minute past the time. So I think, unfortunately, we'll have to cut the conversation short. But we definitely like to invite you to continue thinking about the digital ethics principles, just in general. Maybe even some of those strategies sound familiar, or you might want to consider for your own teaching with or without portfolios. And continue to invite you, of course, to also give us feedback on them. The draft principles document does have Kevin's and my email address on it, so you can very easily reach us if you have questions or if you have any ideas of what we should still include. And so thank you so much, and over to our host from Peralta Community College.
Thank you so much for a really insightful sharing, and I learned a lot about things that are going on that I knew nothing about. And it was lovely to be in a workshop where I had to sort of stay in the main room, but where people had an opportunity to connect in smaller groups. That's always a really lovely thing to do. So thank you so much. I'll remind participants of a few things. One, watch for communication from Equity at Peralta, because information about the recordings, links, and slides will be made available next week after the organizers, Kevin and Didem, have finished. But I also wanted to remind you before I turn off the recording and formally close the session that we have a really lovely closing session that starts in 10 minutes right here in this Zoom room. And it will be Kevin, Kelly, and Didem Ikeji, who have been our primary coordinators, sharing some thoughts to wrap up the 3-day event. So I hope you might go grab a glass of wine or a cup of tea and come back and help us close out this really wonderful Peralta Online Equity Conference.